Every day, we get things off the ground, keeping you connected and secure. We keep things running smoothly and know the importance of giving back. We're always looking at the bigger picture. We are ARA, reliable solutions for facilities and infrastructure.
Welcome to Everyday Greatness, and thanks for watching. I'm your host, Barnaby Howarth. This is a show designed to help people realise there is greatness in being an everyday Harry Sacker Rolls. We're live today at the headquarters of AFL Sydney, the competition where I played most of my footy for the mighty Pennant Hills Demons. I'm going to be speaking today to ex-Sydney Swans cult hero Troy Luff and ex-Vice President of the Pennant Hills Demons, Ian Parker. If we stopped filming right now, this show would have already paid for itself. Today is part 2 in a series looking at the value of old footy friendships. On Wednesday night, I spoke to AFL legends, AFL Hall of Famers and former clubmates Adam Goods and Michael O'Loughlin at the City Cricket Ground. So sitting here today in the offices of the competition where I played most of my footy, talking to an old clubmate and an old vice president, this show feels like it's epic. So if we stop filming right now, it would have already proven itself. Being a part of something feels bloody good. I've been a part of sporting clubs my whole life, more specifically Aussie Rules footy clubs. And the friendships I was making while I was playing sport felt good. But those friendships have become more important than I ever could have realised over the last few years. In 2005, I was bashed in an alcohol-fueled gang attack and had a stroke when I was on 96 games for Pennant Hills. When I came out of my coma after 4 days, I literally couldn't stand still in one position without falling over. My balance was so bad. So I put a line through my footy career, thinking I'd been forced into an early retirement 4 games short of my 100th. But a few years ago, at the West Pennant Hills Sports Club, I was speaking to Ian Chicken Parker, who told me that he'd spoken to our 4th grade coach, who was more than happy for me to play 4 games in 4th grade so I could reach my 100th. And the value of my old footy friendships hit me like a ton of bricks. On the day of my 100th game, the coach told me I could play any position I wanted. The captain stepped aside and let me lead the team for the day. Old teammates and coaches flew out from Melbourne to watch the game of footy, and my sister flew all the way out from England for one night just to watch the footy. I've played in a night final for the Sydney Swans under lights on the MCG. I've kicked goals on the SCG. I was best on ground in Pennant Hills' first grade premiership, and I won a best and fairest for the Sandringham Reserves in the Victorian Football League. But that game, a round 23 4th grade game at Ernholmes Oval in Pennant Hills, is the most significant thing I've done in football. If you've ever doubted whether just trying to be a decent human being and doing the small things, like looking into a person's eyes when you shake their hands and ask them how they are, was enough to be proud of the life you're living, I'm going to be speaking to 2 blokes today who have been doing exactly that their whole lives. So let's find out if that's been enough to make them happy. I'd like to welcome Troy Luff and Ian Parker to Everyday Greatness. Thanks for joining us, boys.
Thanks, Barnaby.
If you wanted to find out the full value of old footy friendships, your first port of call would be to someone who's played a stack of footy, and Troy Luff is one of those. Troy's played over 550 senior AFL games for Nelson Bay, the Sydney Swans, University of New South Wales and Balmain, where he recently fulfilled a dream he's had since he retired from professional football. When Troy retired from playing at the Swans, he made his goal to play a game of footy with his son, Mitchell. Mitchell was only a shade older than a fetus at the time, so a lot of people thought Troy might have been kidding himself. But earlier this year, Troy and Mitchell Luff ran out together for Balmain in the AFL Sydney competition, a father and son. Just bear with me 1 second. Just saying the word Luffy is hard to do without a smile on your face. And Troy is exactly the same bloke. Every time you speak to him, you feel like he's just been doing something really fun. But it hasn't always been that way. In his last season at the Swans, Troy suffered mental health problems. He was getting anxiety about his on-field performance and whether it was good enough. Troy was a bit embarrassed to tell anybody about his problems. He wouldn't even tell his mother. So like a lot of men, he battled through it on his own and thought he was tough enough to deal with the problem himself. After he retired from the Swans, having mental health problems in his last season, Troy thought the best course of action would be to sign up to play amateur AFL footy. So he signed up to play in the AFL Sydney competition, where he still plays today at 46 years of age. Troy knows more than most about the value of old footy friendships, so I'd like to speak to Troy now. Troy, welcome to Everyday Greatness.
Thanks, Barnes, and it's 49, by the way. Well, next week, 49, unfortunately.
49, holy moly, that's a lot of years. Now, before I start, I believe you got something you want to say.
I've got a message for Kira and all the models at Sassy Model Company. Well done on helping get the Sydney Kings over the line for their first win. So great effort, Barnes.
Love your work, Kira. So, Troy, you've played a lot of footy at a lot of clubs. Where have you played? When did you start? And who have you played for?
Well, I started way back in Traralgon, country Victoria, for a team called Cumberland Park in the Traralgon Junior Football League, and I was probably 7 years of age. So, you think about it, that's 42 years of football. Played for Traralgon in their thirds, which is the under 18s. And then from there progressed up to Nelson Bay in the Newcastle League. Before it was the combined Black Diamond, which it is now, so it was just the Newcastle area. And 1990 started at the Swans, 12 years there. And then I always wanted to continue playing footy. I love footy that much. It's at the end of the day, it's just a game, and I want to play the game. And I've played at Balmain and UNSW Bulldogs, and still playing today. So I've actually played now about 17 years of Sydney AFL, and I'll continue to do so into my 50th year next year.
Nice. So when you started playing as a kid, did you ever sit down and think about how important the friendships you're making would be later on in life?
Well, it's funny you say that, because your old mates from way back then, when you're a kid playing football, going to school, they're really your best mates today. And I think about all the friendships I've made over my time for, probably since I was a little kid. And the true friends that are the ones that stand by you as much as anything are the ones you made as a kid, the ones you played football with, the ones you went to school with. And in a couple of weeks' time, I'm actually going back to my old hometown, Traralgon, for a long weekend with all my mates, and they're all still there. And they're all excited that we're going to have another get-together. We had our school reunion last year, and again, all those friends from when you were kids, they're the ones, they're your best friends. They really are. You make a lot of friends along your way, from football, from work, but the ones from when you're a child definitely are the best friends.
So speaking of children, you made it your goal after you retired from the Swans to play a father-son game of footy alongside your son Mitchell.
Yep.
How old was he when you made that dream, that goal?
He was born when I was at the Swans in 1996, and I always wanted to play a game with him. And at first it might have been a father-son game at a football club or something like that, but as he got older and as I was continuing to play, I just end up saying, you know what, I want to have a real game of football with my son. What a great achievement that would be. And lucky enough this year, he was coming to watch a Swans GWS game, and I had to actually work, so I couldn't play in the seniors, but I asked the reserve grade coach, and he said, yeah, look, you can have a game. It was only a quarter and a half, but it was the best feeling to warm up with your son, driving to the game with your son, preparing with your son, and then run out. And lucky enough, the coach put him into the centre. I played in the ruck, and it was just like, Mitchell, where do you want it? Here you go, here you go. And look, it was great. And I walked off with such a big smile. And it was, tick that box. It was something that I've done once, and I want to do it again. Like, I really do. He's unfortunately plays football on the Gold Coast, so it makes it tough. But I want to do my best to try and make it happen again next season.
There you go, Mitchell. There's a personal message from your father. Move back home. So talk me through how was it when you walked into the change rooms before the game and put your socks and your boots on next to each other?
Oh, look, it was just the best feeling to know that something that you've wanted to do it's like anything. If you have a goal or something that you set yourself that you want to achieve and you actually get to achieve that, just the thrill of doing it, the excitement of doing it, it was. From the time he said he can play and the coach said you can play, it was just excitement for the next 2 days. And I haven't stopped telling people about it. Even though it was about 3 months ago, I still haven't stopped telling people about it.
Beautiful.
It was great.
So towards the end of your professional career at the Swans, you had some mental health issues.
Yep.
How did they manifest? How did you first notice them?
Going through a marriage breakup, and for anyone that's ever had mental health issues, that's a bad way, I guess you would say, to start, or it's a common way to start with depression, anxiety, and unfortunately that really did contribute to me having to retire. And as you mentioned in the introduction, I didn't tell anybody. One person I told, and it was the toughest thing I've ever been through. You'd wake up every morning and you'd cry because you don't want to go to football training. You'd go to football training, I'd come home, sit in front of a computer or a Game Boy game playing because I didn't want to do anything else. Work suffered, my family suffered, my children suffered. But because I didn't tell anyone, no one knew what was going on. In the end, I had to go and speak to the coach, Rodney Eade, and I said, look, I can't continue playing. Thankfully, I got a last game here at the SCG with my children to do a lap of honour, and I sought help after that, and that helped me want to progress playing football. And once I got over it, I guess you'd say, I ended up becoming an ambassador for Beyond Blue, and still am, but it took me 10 years to tell people. And since being an ambassador for Beyond Blue, it's rewarding helping people, explaining to them what issues you can have going through depression and anxiety, and then trying to help along the way. And now it was the worst period of my life by far, but now doing the work, I'm glad I got to talk to people about it, and glad that I sought help, and glad that I now tell people about it, because you can go and help others. It's just something you never want to go through. So
now that you're a fairly prominent spokesperson for mental health, how have your old footy friendships come back to help you during that tough period?
It's funny because some of the players that saw me back then, once I started talking to people about it, they actually turned around and said, that explains it, meaning that they could see there was something wrong, but they didn't know what was wrong. And you're talking, almost 20 years ago or 18 years ago, and the stigma behind mental health, it's still today, but 18 years ago it was worse. And that's why men are men, you don't tell anybody about it. And so they didn't know about it. I was losing weight, I was unfit to a certain extent, but mentally I'd still be able to push through a hard training session. And so in the end, that once I told people about it and spoke to them about it, my friends then rang me and said, I'm glad you're talking about it now, and talked about it. So, and it's something that comes up now and again, but I'm not shy to talk about it anymore. I want to talk about it if it's needed in a conversation.
So can you tell me, what was your happiest moment at the Swans, and who was around you when you had that moment?
Look, there's probably a couple. I think as much as it was a tough moment, but my last game, my retirement game, I got to do a lap of honour with my kid. We won by something like 80 points. I took a mark and the siren went and I had the ball in my hand. And my mother, my father, my family were there, my two children. I got to walk around the SCG with my daughter and my son, Mitchell and Olivia. And most players, when they retire, they get in the back of a car. But I wanted to be able to walk around and thank the public, I guess, the supporters personally. And so I walked up to the fence and was high-fiving all the supporters because they stuck around. After the game had finished, there was another 10 minutes before I did that. People stayed just to say well done, and that was probably the happiest and the saddest at the same time, because that was the last time I was doing that. But my children got to share something that was very special, and I treasure that moment. And of course, look, making a grand final, AFL grand final, we didn't win it, but making that week leading into the grand final was a great moment in football.
So you are a very proud father. What do you see as your children's biggest challenge in making friends today?
Look, my son first had to move state, and when you move state and you go to a new area as a 19-year-old, it is very hard to build up friendships because you've left your schoolmates behind, you've left your footy mates behind, and you've got to start again. And it took a while at a new football club before you can build that friend. And when you're shy, it's really hard. My daughter has just started university in Newcastle this year. Again, she's moved from her hometown, she's moved away, she doesn't know anybody. She tried actually at UNSW to make friends, and she just said she just couldn't do it. She has no connection with it. She left there after 3 months because it was really hard to make friends. And now at Newcastle Uni, lucky for her that some of her friends from Nelson Bay and Foster have gone to that university. And that just shows how advantageous it is to have maintained friendship as a child, because later on in life you need those friends, and that's what she needs right now at Newcastle Uni. My son, on the other hand, has had to start again, redevelop friendships. He's still good friends with all his friends from Nelson Bay and Foster where they lived, but he has to start again now, making new friends.
So what advice do you give them both when they say they're struggling to make friends?
You've got to be outgoing. You've got to, I guess, introduce yourself to people. You've got to, if you're in a class or whatever, after a class, just go and say hello to someone, because you never know how good a friend that person could be. That it's hard when you're shy, but once you develop friendships, you've got to instigate friendship. You've got to ask them to come and have a beer with you. Come, let's go and have a kick of the footy, and friendships develop, because as you know in life, friends are nearly as important as family, and you need to have as many friends around you as you can, and so you have to get out there and make friends yourself.
Well, Troy Luff, speaking of friends and family, I believe you've got to go and spend time with your daughter, so I'll let you go.
My little 2-year-old.
Thank you for joining us on Everyday Greatness.
Mate, thank you, Barnes, and good luck with everything.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us on the show.
Thank you. All right, now we'll get Ian Parker to slide over into the hot seat. Ian Parker, welcome.
Thanks, Barnaby.
If you wanted to find out more about the value of old footy friendships, your next port of call would be to speak to somebody who's been involved in footy since dinosaurs roamed the earth.
Oh, come on.
And Ian Parker is one of those. Ian's involvement with Aussie Rules footy started when he played under 10s at his primary school in Hobart. He's since played all sorts of roles at all sorts of clubs, from past players club president at North Hobart, to timekeeper at the Sydney Swans, to vice president at Pennant Hills. Ian's involvement in footy has spanned 62 years. That's a long time in footy. So Ian has witnessed firsthand and also seen a lot of what a good footy friendship can mean. If you want to find out more about what good footy friendships are, you'd want to speak to somebody who has a lot of good friends from football. And Ian Parker is one of the best. He's not only a sharp tactical football mind, a dedicated administrator for football clubs, he's also a loving father, a loving husband, a father figure and a friend to many. Ian's been involved in football for so long, there's probably a lot of people that don't even realise his name isn't actually Chicken and that it's Ian. So, to tell us more about the value of old footy friendships, I'd like to welcome Ian Chicken Parker to Everyday Greatness.
Thank you, Barnaby.
Thank you for joining me, Chicken. Now, before I start, Chicken, I believe you've got something you want to say.
Yes, last Saturday night, I believe Peter Physic was awarded life membership, or it was a President's Award, that's right, at East Coast Eagles. So Peter's been involved in that club for many years, seen many changes over that period of time. So congratulations and well done to you, Peter, on being awarded the President's Award for East Coast Eagles in 2018.
Congratulations, Fizzer. Now, Chicken, can you please explain why people call you Chicken?
It goes back a long way. When I first started at North Hobart in fact it was 1962, a good friend of mine and player at the time, Trevor Best, was I guess the senior player that took me under his wing, and it was discovered that my father's name was Chick. So they didn't want to come up with me as Chick, so I ended up with Chicken, and it's been with me ever since. In fact, what you mentioned in the intro about not many people know my name as Ian. When I go down to the footy club at Pennant Hills these days, everyone calls me Chicken. So if I said to one of the new players in the under-18s, I'm Ian, he'd look at you with a strange look on his face and say, "Oh, I only know you as Chicken."
So, are you still in touch with any of your footy friends from that first fleet?
The first fleet game down at Trumpet Park. Back in the days of first footy was North Hobart and playing in underage, and then played my first senior game at North Hobart with Peter Jones, who went on to play a couple of hundred games at Carlton. So all those players in those premiership years of 67, 69, still in touch with a lot of them, and went to a 50th reunion last year in Hobart of the 1967 premiership team, and they're organising the 50-year reunion of the 1969 premiership team, which was coached by John Devine. That's going to be sort of mid-year next season. So yeah, still in contact with a lot of those people.
So when you were playing footy as a kid and then on committees with people later in life, did you ever look at your friendships and think, they're going to be lifelong, they're going to stick with me forever?
Well, yes. In one aspect, yes. In another aspect, it's how you make friends and develop the friendship with those people. Understand how they operate, what they're doing by being involved in a committee, or what they're doing by being involved in the footy team. So a lot of those friendships that you developed over the years, you've maintained right through to today. And no matter where you are, if you're in Hobart or you're in Melbourne and you know someone that you want to catch up with, it's just a matter of a simple phone call and you catch up with them. So yeah, friendships which you establish, as Troy said, at a young age, you maintain through for the rest of your life.
So when you moved to Sydney from Hobart, what got you involved in footy again?
In Sydney?
In Sydney.
Well, it was interesting, after being on the TFL, president of North Hobart in the early 80s, and then on the TFL commission till 1990, which was about an 8-year period. I wanted to have a bit of a break from footy when I moved to Sydney in mid-1990. So I got Sebastian enrolled at Westbrook, and he was playing in the underage. And then the late Mike Kenny, who many people probably know, got me involved with Westbrook. He was working with Goodyear Tyres at the time, and he happened to go to Hobart and met up with a guy, Barry Parker, who's no relation, and he was the manager of Goodyear down there. And Barry mentioned to him that I'd moved to Sydney and I'd been involved in AFL with North Hobart. So the next thing, Mike's on the phone and got me roped in, and then for what that was probably about 7 or 8 years, I was involved with Mike on Sydney Junior Development. In those days, when we first started, I think there were 46 teams in the Junior Northside competition, and now there's probably 120. So all the ground, the development at that stage was done with Mike Kenny and myself and a couple of others on Northside.
Took yourself up, chicken.
Yeah, you said, how did you get involved? You wanted to have a bit of a break away from footy, and all of a sudden Mike gets wind of someone's moved to Sydney that knows a bit about AFL, and in those days, footy was still developing in Sydney, so I guess they roped in someone that came from a football state and knew a bit about the game.
So your son, Sebastian,
Yes.
needed his footy friends around him when he was in a pretty bad car accident a few years ago. How did that come about?
It was a car accident in that the car cleaned him up, in his words. A bit of a solid shirt front, that the car was going down a street and Sebastian was just on the side of the road, and the car cleaned him up, but he spent 2 or 3 weeks in intensive care, and then he had all his, they were in fact under 18 footy players at the time that went into the hospital and were visiting him and to make sure that he pulled through. And then when he came out of hospital, in a matter of a couple of weeks, he was back with Pennant Hills attending training, and everyone was sort of getting around him to make sure he got through the recovery program, which took about nearly 9 months in the end.
So how important was Seb's footy friends at the time in getting him through that process?
It was one of the vital things that in the early days, because he had 2 weeks in intensive care, and the number of players that went in to see him. I know in the first couple of, I think it was about 48 hours, Michael Sullivan and a couple of the other young boys from the 18s had been in to try and see him, but unfortunately they weren't allowing too many people in to see him in those early days. But those friendships have continued right through from that day, and I know that a lot of those players that played together with him in the under-18s, they still catch up on a regular basis now, and it's reached a stage where, I know about 4 of them have got children of their own, and the whole gathering, gets together with their kids, so the friendships continue on.
So you've been involved with the mighty Pennant Hills Demons for about 18 years.
That's right.
And they've won a few premierships over that time. Is success at a football club essential to enduring friendships?
Yes, it is. You go back, Pennant Hills won their first premiership in 2000 when you were playing. I was only on the committee in those days, but then was vice president from about 2002 through till 2015 or 16. We won premierships in 2006 and 8 and 15. And a lot of the friendships that came out of those players, particularly the first premiership in 2006, and a lot of the players continued on in 2008, those premierships continue today, because when we have the annual Back to Earn Homes Day every year, where the club play the one game at the original home ground. Last year, unfortunately, I couldn't, or this season just gone, I couldn't be there, but it was about 18 of the premiership team turned up. So those friendships continue, and a lot of those players came from interstate. So, you know, it's vital that those long-lasting friendships continue on.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of long-lasting friendships, how important are the non-footballers at a football club? The mothers, wives, sisters, cousins?
They're a vital part of any football club, particularly at a grassroots level or a community-based club like Pennant Hills are. You rely on the mothers and to operate things such as the canteen, the girlfriends, the wives. They all assist. They have ladies' day. They have sort of trivia nights and all these sorts of things. So it's all part of an integral football family. And being a community-based club such as Pennant Hills are, all those people are, they're vital to ensure the continuity of the football club going forward.
So you must have witnessed some incredible acts of friendship in your time, both in football and with your son's accident. What are the standout moments for you?
Oh, gee, there have been many over the years. Some situations arise where someone gets into, a tedious situation where they're having trouble in their life, or they're having trouble in family relationships or anything like that. And being able to talk to someone, as Troy said, it's vital that you can have a friend that you can go and talk to, you can rely on, you can confide in, and at the end of the game, if you want to call it that, there's light at the end of a tunnel by having a friend like that you can talk to.
So you've accumulated a lot of pearls of wisdom over the years. Do you ever sit back these days and look at your friendships and reflect on how important they've been, or you just float with the breeze and end up where you end up?
Oh no, I think you hear a lot of things over the years, and one of the best sayings I ever heard was from the late Mike Kenny, who used to say, "If it has to be, it's up to me." And he was one of those guys that put a lot into footy, and you admire the way he went about it, the time and effort that he put into it. And you see a lot of people over the years. You said that I've been involved in footy for 62 years. Well, yeah, I have, but there are also a lot of other people that are involved not in directly up front, but behind the scenes. That they are part and parcel of any football club, whether it be at AFL level or right down to the grassroots level. And it's all part of friendship and working together and relating together that make community clubs such as Pennant Hills the success that they are.
The thing that amazed me about football clubs is that when you're there, you think your time in the club is the be-all and end-all. You think it's the most amazing thing ever.
That's right.
Is at the Pennant Hills Footy Club, are those friendships still developing and it's still thriving?
Oh, they continue on. It's interesting at Pennant Hills when a new person comes to the club, how welcome, it's like they're welcomed with open arms to get involved in the club, whether it be a player or the player's parents and everything. They are brought into the club and they're made part of the family atmosphere that's around the club. So, yeah, ongoing friendships with a club are vital to ensure the club succeeds into the future. And you've only got to look at Pennant Hills. They started off with, several years ago, we only had 3 teams, seniors, reserves and under-18s, then got into a thirds, then to a fourths, then to a women's team. And this year we've had 8 teams, including 2 women's teams. So the club has continued to grow, and it's all because of the friendships and the relationships that have been developed over the years that makes it go ahead with such a success.
Ian Parker, I love your pearls of wisdom, and I thank you. I thank you for being on the show today. I thank you for your friendship over the years, and I also want to thank Troy Luff for joining us today on Everyday Greatness and sharing his pearls of wisdom. We're going to show in a second. We're going to replay episode 1 of this series of the value of old footy friendships with my interview with Adam Goods and Michael O'Loughlin from the SCG. But before we do that, I'd like to thank Ian and Troy again for being my guests today. I'd like to thank our major sponsor, ARA Group. I'd like to thank the crew at Look Studio. And I'd like to thank you for watching. If you have any comments or suggestions, please email us at everydaygreatness44@gmail.com. So here they are, Michael O'Loughlin and Adam Goods.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
I've been walking through doors sideways since 1999. My head's been so big, thanks to Michael O'Loughlin. When I played my season at the Swans, I was 18 years old and a year out of high school, and the Swans were the team that I barracked for. I felt like I was a kid who'd want to be a Swan for a day competition. I had posters of half my team on my bedroom wall. So after I left the Swans at the end of '98, I went to the club best and fairest dinner, and I did so as a Swans fan. I went with my 2 mates and spent half the night looking over at the players' table, too shy to go over and say g'day. But at the end of the dinner, I was walking towards my car with my 2 mates, and we passed a group of players, and Mickey O'Loughlin yelled out, "Hey Barnaby, why didn't you come? I was pretty offended you didn't come over and talk to us. Are you too good for us now?" When we got a bit further down the road towards the car, my mate started elbowing me and giggling, saying, "That was Mickey O'Loughlin." I tried to play it cool. I was like, "Yeah, I know who he is. We're pretty tight, Magic and I." Mickey O'Loughlin is one of those rare human beings who can add value to people's world without them even realising it. As a footballer, Mickey was incredible, but as a retired footballing legend and an everyday bloke, his influence extends further than he probably realises. He's got more pies than fingers to put them in. Mickey is, as well as being the co-founder of the Go Foundation, Mickey is the managing director of the ARA Indigenous Services. He was the co-founder of CMC Indigenous Cleaning. He was a coach at the Swans Academy. And he's had a book written about him. Mickey O'Loughlin was one of the most incredible AFL footballers of all time, and he is a great Australian man. And Mickey O joins us now. Mickey O, thank you for joining us.
Mate, thanks for having me, mate. Thank you very much.
Before I start, I believe you have something you want to say.
I do. I just caught wind of this. Young Luca Crivelli. Just want to let you know everything's going to be all right now that you've become a diabetic. Just think Paddy McCartan, mate.
Good work, Luca. So, when you were drafted to the Swans at 17 years of age, you actually wanted to go to Carlton and live with Sticks Kernahan. How did you react when the Swans read your name out at the national draft?
Oh, wow. You're going back now, mate. As a 17-year-old kid, all I wanted to do was play football for the Carlton Blues. And, you go through the draft, you meet other football clubs and to see if they're interested in you. But when the Swans came knocking, I wasn't too interested in them. And I think if you cast your mind and memory back, they finished on the bottom of the ladder a fair bit in the early 90s. So when my name got read out to play for the Sydney Swans Footy Club, I was in tears. I didn't like the club, I didn't like their song, and as I said, as a young boy wanting to play AFL football and play for the Blues, I was absolutely devastated, and little did I know how lucky I was to come to such a great club. And we had a bit of work to do to get to where we wanted to go as a football club, but that's all in the journey. That's the best bit, I reckon. You find out a lot about the people and the players and the club and the organisation as in general, and having that journey, going on that and being lucky enough to be on that journey was amazing.
So do you think you're a different bloke now after playing at the Swans for around 15 years than you were as that tempestuous little kid that didn't want to come here at all?
Absolutely, without a question. I think as a 17-year-old, when I got here, it took me 3 or 4 weeks to actually talk to some of the coaches and really hold a conversation, I guess. And now I'm probably one of probably got the biggest mouth in the, at that stage at the football club, and now obviously retired. Love having a yarn and meeting new people, and so absolutely. I had no concept of what it was like to become I guess a professional football player. The work involved and the sacrifices you have to make. But again, a huge learning curve for me, and I had some really good people to help me along that journey as well. So I was very, very lucky.
So you're a proud Aboriginal man, and you had a pretty strong idea of your heritage and where you were in the world when you came to the Swans. How did it feel to help instill that same pride of being an Aboriginal man as you did to Adam when he first came to the club?
I think it's you get older, you get more confident in who you are, and certainly from my point of view, I grew up in a big Indigenous community back home in Adelaide, and so I was very fortunate. I was surrounded by cousins, I was surrounded by aunties and uncles, and you played sport and you went to school, and the struggles and the success stories along that journey. So coming to Sydney, it was a culture shock because I had no family here. All of my people were back in Adelaide, and I was able to play some football and meet some new friends away from the game. And then when Adam came to the football club, it was just a natural progression. We're blood, and so being able to get, I guess, we hit it off straight away. You know, like it was. We had some other Indigenous players here as well, which really sort of helped that. In my view. But the football clubs they're unique. They're different to working at some business somewhere around the nation or around the country or around the world. Football clubs, you get here as a 17-year-old, you live and breathe, you live with the people you work with, you come to training, you go to the movies with the people you work with. You have to become friends straight away, as well as colleagues, because everyone, certainly in this football club, at the Sydney Swans Football Club, everyone was from interstate, almost. So you form those bonds, and you become great mates with a lot of the guys you're training with. And so again, right time, right place, very lucky. But then also you've got to sort of make your own luck a little bit along that journey. You've got to work hard. And sometimes we forget how many young players want to aspire to become AFL players and play 100 games, 200 games, win a premiership and win a Brownlow and all those kinds of things. It doesn't happen like that. The process to becoming that young boy to becoming an established player is bloody tough. And I'm just, as I said, I'm very lucky that I had some really great role models and people that were able to guide me along that journey.
So you and Adam both co-founded the Go Foundation.
Yep.
Tell us a bit about what the Go Foundation does.
Oh, look, the Go Foundation, the Goods O'Loughlin Foundation, is something very near and dear to both Adam and my heart. It's something that we've always done, I guess, over the journey as AFL players, going to schools and going to hospitals and going to communities and spreading the word about working hard, staying in school, eating the right foods, listening to your teachers and your parents. As I said, we had really great role models growing up. Our mothers are our universe. They really taught us at an early age, if you want something, you have to work hard. So that was very evident, and I guess the Go Foundation has allowed us to take that to another level. And we concentrate on education, and we think education is the absolute key for our people. Staying in school, finishing school, enjoying school, that's critical. Going on to university, starting businesses, running organisations, that's a real key component to who we are and what we're about. And the Go Foundation, I guess, is that allows us to do that.
So you're also the Managing Director of ARA Indigenous Services. Why have you found it so important to give back to Indigenous communities and start things that they can really build their lives on?
I guess as a young boy playing, aspiring to be an AFL player, I'd seen these players on television and I wanted to be like them. And I thought, oh geez, that looks cool, that looks great, I'd love to be able to do that. I was able to do that and become successful at it in a really great environment. And I wanted to do that after football. I wanted to start something. I didn't know what I wanted to do at that stage. And I loved coaching, so I sort of dipped my toe in that a little bit as well. And I really enjoy, and I miss that now. As you know, you run a business, you're 24/7 and you're looking after people and you're winning work and you're executing what you're supposed to execute. So starting a business was always a dream. I'm one of those guys that I have pretty ambitious. I think I've got a good work ethic. I'm really good at. I think I had a great. Sorry, I'll rewind. I had a great role model in regards to the business side of things that was able to sort of show me the ropes and tell me there's nothing too daunting here. It's like playing your first game as a player. You as a young boy, you're nervous. You want to get out there and you want to do really, really well. But there's a process. You've got to eat the right foods. You've got to get fit. You've got to do all your training. Work's no different. You've got to do your homework. What are you about? What do you stand for? What are your values and behaviours in your workplace? So, and you know, we've been really lucky. We've had a lot of success at ARA Indigenous Services, and I'm really proud of that. But employing a lot of our people is an absolute priority, and we continue to work and strive for that as well. So, again. I reckon I've been in the right place, right time, and I've met some great people to help me along that journey. But you really got to roll your sleeves up and get to work sometimes as well. So, very, very lucky. This state, New South Wales, has been bloody good to both Adam and I.
Yeah. So, how have your old footy friends helped you in your business pursuits and the Go Foundation?
It's a really good question. Hopefully, both Adam and I, as business owners, ex-players, can inspire them that you can move from football and be successful away from the footy field. I'm guessing, and you'd have to ask a lot of those guys. I think they see that. I know they're very, very proud of both Adam and I. They always ask how's work going, and we, you know, it's great to get around what they're doing as well. A lot of the guys are in that corporate sector and working very hard themselves. Not all of them own their business, and it's really tough when you do have your own business. But the lessons we've learned along the journey from playing football: show up on time, remain humble, be respectful, work hard. We take those lessons into business as well.
So, do Indigenous kids need to be an AFL Hall of Famer, Brownlow medalist, or an Australian of the Year to be proud of themselves, or is being an everyday Joe Bag of Donuts enough?
Oh, look, absolutely. I think when Adam and I go to schools and communities, the one thing we tell and talk to the kids and certainly preach to the kids about staying in school. That is the absolute most important thing. Participation. You know, I know as a young boy I was a bit of a smart aleck and got into trouble a little bit, but I think my heart was in the right place. I think that is when you go to school and you're meeting new friends and doing new experiences and learning new subjects. I didn't, you know, how valuable that was. I had some great teachers and went to a couple of great schools. So, but I think I always talk about in football and in business, it's always been about your effort and rolling your sleeves up and having a go. I love that. I guess, and if I look back on my career, a lot of people didn't think I would play AFL football. And if I got drafted, I'd be lucky enough to stay there for a year or two and then be back in Adelaide doing whatever. So it was always about having a go and your effort. If you're going to do something, do it to your best ability. Don't do it half-assed and make sure you give it everything you got.
Well, you've certainly done that.
Yeah.
So, explain to non-football people what the Bloods culture was or is.
I think, without complicating it, it was more about having care for each other as a team and the individuals in it. Everyone's got their own different personalities and how they do things and whatnot, but I think we lacked a care factor for each other where we genuinely wanted to see the other person do really, really well. And probably the other one is going above and beyond for not only your teammates and the team, but the club. And it was everything from, I guess, when you get and you're comfortable in your environment, you can become slack on a lot of things. So taking your tape off your knee or your shoulder or around your head, and then just dumping it on the ground for the trainers to pick up, actually picking it up, putting it in a bin. It's just those really small things, and people turning up late it certainly changed my perspective on how you should be doing things. Because as I said, you can get comfortable if you had a little bit of success and you get slack on things. And I think being accountable for not only what I do and what I execute, but also my teammates, and making sure that they're doing everything that they possibly can doing. So, the Bloods culture is just it's something that we all agreed upon and believed in, and we wanted to be successful. And how do you be successful is you've got to do everything to the letter almost, and I think we were able to do that and provide a culture where it's really strong, that when young people come in, they go, wow, this is really easy. For me to be respected in this football club, I just need to do these 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever those things were.
Yeah.
And those things, I guess, they didn't require talent to do it. It was anyone could do it. You can take someone off the streets and tell them, hey, these are the ways and the behaviours that we hold dear here at Sydney, and if you do that, you'll be successful. And those things, and from memory, it didn't take a lot of skill to do. You didn't have to be a guy who could kick 100 goals or have 35 possessions every week. These things were quite simple, and we try to keep it simple.
Yeah. So the man in charge of the Swans at the time was Paul Roos. You and Adam have both have named Paul Roos the bloke who really unshackled your innermost self-belief. What sort of influence has Paul Roos's guidance had on this football club?
Oh, it's been huge. And I was lucky enough to be here with the great Ron Barassi as a 17-year-old, and I was intimidated and almost had those days a fear of talking to the coach. But Roosie was quite open and very articulated and how he wanted to get, I guess, how he saw the game. He made it really simple for a lot of us. We're not the smartest blokes, and he kept it really simple, and we thrived under it. So absolutely, the other one's probably Rodney Eade was great for me as a young person, but Roosie certainly absolutely took that to another level, and we're able to get the best out of every single one of us on that list.
Well, Michael O'Loughlin, thank you so much for joining us. You really epitomised to me what a great Australian bloke is like, so thank you for
I appreciate
coming.
it,
I believe you've got to go and pick your kids up from sport. So.
I apologise, guys. I have to leave. I've got to go pick the kids up from sport, but I'm going to leave you with this guy. He's done a little bit in his career as well.
Righto.
Thanks for having me,
Thanks,
mate.
Mick.
Cheers.
Cheers.
See you guys.
Adam Goods, welcome.
Into the hot seat.
That's right. Hope it's still warm. If somebody asked me to name the best AFL player I've ever seen, Adam Goods would be close to the top of that list. Goodsy had that rare ability to turn a game of football on his own performance. If Goodsy was on the field, it didn't matter what the score was. You always felt like the Swans were a chance. If somebody then asked me to name the best blokes I've ever met, Adam Goods will be up towards the top of that list as well. A few years ago, I launched my biography here at the SCG, and I invited Adam and a few old Swans teammates to come along. Just after he'd accepted my invitation, Adam started getting booed by AFL fans while he was playing for being proud of the person he was. So I thought if anybody had an excuse not to turn up, it'd be Adam. But not only did he show up, he walked around the room and talked to everybody with a grace and a dignity that I thought was phenomenal, given the ugly racial situation he was in. I've had to pinch myself quite a few times when I've rehearsed this line over the last couple of weeks, but I'd like to welcome to everyday greatness, Adam Goods. Goodsy, thanks for joining me.
Pleasure, Barnaby, absolute pleasure.
Now, before I start, I believe you have something you want to say.
Mate, I do. I just want to have a big shout out to Ollie Sanderson, who played with the Kareen Cougars this year. First season playing Aussie Royals football. I heard you're one of the best players, but the biggest thing that I like that people keep telling me, Ollie, is that you did the team thing. So, mate, keep that up.
Love your work, Ollie. So, when you were named Australian of the Year a few years ago, you had 180 requests for media appearances in your first month. Why are you here? Why did you say yes to coming on this show today?
I think there are obviously the budget for this show is massive, Barnaby, and you're paying for my mortgages. But no, so the truth of it all, mate, is there's some people that you meet in your life that inspire you. There's people that have to overcome a lot of adversity, and there's people that just have stuff thrown at them and they just soldier on, and you're one of those people, mate. And I think Michael and myself, and just like the brothers at the Swans, we'd do absolutely anything for one of our brothers. And even though you played with us for 1 year, we always look back at those players that played for our footy club, and if they overcome any adversity, we're always there to support them and pick them up, mate. So it's great to be on your show. I've heard a little bit about it, and I'm here to support you and your journey and what you're up to.
Did I mention I had a big head? So talk to me about the Bloods culture. Mickey touched on it, but how was that instigated? What was said? Who instigated the meeting?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us, we instigated leading teams to facilitate our culture session around who we wanted to be, what our perception was out in the AFL world, and then really drawing between what our perception of ourselves were, but what the market was saying about us. And the biggest thing for me was that we came up with a set of core values and behaviours that really underpinned our Bloods culture for the next 3 seasons, and to really focus on 3 key values, and that was to be hard, disciplined and relentless. And for me, having not grown up with my culture, having to be part of a culture that we just started with core values, with our leaders, I would see our leaders as being the elders of our group that had to educate our players, had to discipline our players. So for me, I felt part of a culture all of a sudden, and what it meant to be in a culture. And I really thrived in that. I really thrived in living up to the behaviours, really thrived in it so much that I actually wanted to be a leader for the very first time in my life.
So was the Bloods culture at the footy club, was it practically enforced, or was it more an unspoken law?
No, it definitely is enforced. I think like any culture, you have to have a language that you speak. You have to have ceremonies, and one of those ceremonies for me is singing that song after a victory, or it might be the disciplinary acts that we have after players missing sessions during the week, where we'd go down the beach and do punishment sessions down there. But for me, the Bloods culture isn't something you just flick the switch and you turn on. You don't walk in the front doors of Dryden Avenue, the Swans offices, and go, yep, I'm switching back on now. This was a 24/7 commitment that we made to each other.
So you're a proud Aboriginal man yourself these days, but you didn't have that firmer grasp on who you were and where you were from when you arrived at the club. What made you want to go and seek out your heritage?
Yeah, that's right, mate. Mum was taken away from her family when she was 5, which was really sad. So I don't have that connection to country, language, where my people are from. And I think once I moved to Sydney and the first reporter puts that microphone in front of my face and says, oh, you're an Indigenous role model, how does that make you feel? And internally I'm thinking, well, I actually don't know what it means to be an Indigenous person. So I had to go on that journey, and that journey really started for me over here in Redfern at Eora TAFE, and I did a diploma in Aboriginal Studies, and that's where I really got an education, just the real foundations of what's happened since colonisation, all the bad stuff that's happened to Aboriginal people, and that just really gave me the foundation to make other people aware of it, to start conversations about why aren't we talking about this? Why isn't this taught in our schools? And that really catapulted my journey on my Indigenous history and my identity.
So as an everyday bloke, Brownlow medals, Aboriginal role models aside, what do you think it is about sport that helps kids want to pursue their life's journey and find out who they are?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me, Barnaby, was that footy was the great equaliser. Anytime I went onto the footy field, I was just like everybody else. And the way I played footy and the being one of the better players actually helped break down barriers when I moved from small country town to small country town. And those barriers, people liking me, people teasing me, people bullying me, because I was good at sport, it actually made it easier for me to assimilate and fit into those communities.
So speaking of the booing, how did it make you feel as a proud Aboriginal man that crowd started booing you while you were playing football?
Yeah, look, it was really tough, because usually when someone says something to you, it's in your face, or you can see who that person is. And when that booing was happening, it was happening in the crowd. I couldn't see who it was. Those people weren't making themselves known to me. And at the very beginning of it, I thought, okay, well, I've been booed in the past, but usually that was just on games, single games. But it just sort of kept going and rolling on from game to game, and that started to really frustrate me, and I didn't understand it, and that's why I wanted to come out, and the club came out and said, look, I think this has racial undertones. I think that people are doing this week in and week out to really, from my point of view, it felt like to really hurt me because of who I am as a person and what I stood up for and my values, and that was really sad. And it obviously got to that point where I just couldn't take it anymore, and I needed that week off. And that was the week when I knew in my mind that I wouldn't be playing the season after 2015.
So that ugly racial stuff that you got engulfed in at the end of your career, did that help to spark your reason for starting the Go Foundation?
Oh, not really, Barney. I think for us, we started the Go Foundation 2009, so it's going to be 10 years next year in September. What it did spark for me was that there's still a massive amount of work that we need to do, and I still want to be part of that work in breaking down those barriers, having those conversations, keep wanting to help empower our young Indigenous students at primary school, at high school, at university. So it's only ignited the fire of more than trying to destroy it.
So when you came to the Swans, did you make a conscious effort to be a good bloke because you thought it might help you out later in life with the Go Foundation and things like that, or did you just do what you thought was right and the wind blew you where it blew you?
Oh, look, as you can probably remember, Barnaby, when I was at the Swans, I was a very quiet, shy young kid. You're lucky to get 2 words out of me, and how times have changed. But for me, I just wanted to represent, my family, my community well. And I had some fantastic role models like Michael, like Paul Kelly, Tony Lockett, Paul Roos, Mark Bays, Stuart Maxfield at our footy club that, I just had to watch them and follow in their footsteps. And, even playing with Roosie for a couple of seasons, just to watch those incredible champions of their game who were actually good blokes, who didn't let their egos overrun, the type of person that they are. And that's where I learnt how to be not only a good footballer, but a good person as well.
So Paul Roos is a player. Did you ever look at him as a player and think, he's going to be a sensational coach one day?
Oh, definitely not. You play against people and you never think that, they're going to be a great coach. What I think Roosie did exceptionally well was he had a great mind for the game and how it was played, and he had a great way of bringing people together. And what he was able to do by starting the Bloods culture and empowering the player group was a completely different way of looking at a coaching and player relationship, where it was no longer a dictatorship where the coach, whatever the coach said, that was what was supposed to be done. This was the players having decisions and choices to be made on what's best for the footy club, and we really embraced that, and it really worked for us.
So you mentioned a few old mates from the Swans a second ago. What is it about playing football together that makes friendships endure and forge so strongly for so long?
I think winning premierships helps with that, Barnaby. I think belonging to something that's bigger than us as individuals, and I think for us that was the Bloods culture. So that made it a lot easier for us to come together, have those longer lasting relationships, and really focus on what was in front of us. And now that we are, most of us are all retired and moved on, we are still involved in each other's lives. We have this connection with each other that comes not only from being a Blood, but being a premiership player, and someone that's crossed our paths along the way.
So you yourself have done some pretty special things in your lifetime. Do you think you need to be a special human being and have accolades pouring out of your trophy cabinet, or can you be just a regular human being to be proud of yourself?
Look, I think the biggest thing about people wanting to be a professional athlete is, if you want to be a professional athlete, understand the journey and the work that you have to do to get there. If that's unrealistic, then use that exact same principle to get to wherever you want to get to, whether it's being an architect, whether it's being a doctor, whether you want to fly spaceships up into space, whatever it might be, the same process needs to be put in place. That's my goal. These are the small goals and steps I need to make to get there. And you just keep working on those smaller steps as you keep climbing. And for me, I was just incredibly lucky that I had great role models, I had great leaders, had some good luck physically with my body, and you know what? I made some good choices along the way, and one of those choices was to never to leave this place.
Very good idea. So do you still hang out and catch up with your old footy friends, your old premiership teammates?
Unfortunately, I do, mate. It's hard to get a word in with hanging around the likes of Mickey O, Brett Kerr, Craig Bolton, Reece Shaw, these guys that are still involved and still around in Sydney, and we've got a basketball team called the Vikings that plays on Monday nights. Myself, Mickey O, Brett Kirk, Shaw's moved to Melbourne, which is unfortunately lost him, but we've got Tim Schmidt in there. We've recruited Dean Cox now as a Swans coaching staff member. We've got a old reserve player, Kieran Emery, who you might know, who plays in our team as well. And we've also got Chris Goodrup, who's in our team, who used to work at the Swans here in the Swans Academy.
Adam Goods, you're an incredible human being doing incredible things. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's over already?
It is over already,
Oh,
I'm
man,
afraid.
I'm just getting warmed up.
Well, you can sing a song if you like.
Oh, no songs here, nothing to show off.
Thank you, Goodsy, and thank you to Mickey O, and thank you for watching. I hope that you got something out of this episode that helps make you really proud of being an everyday Joe Bag of Donuts. If you can't though, I hope you walk down the street with your head up, your shoulders back, being proud of being an everyday Harry Sacker Rolls. Thank you.
Every day, we get things off the ground, keeping you connected and secure. We keep things running smoothly and know the importance of giving back. We're always looking at the bigger picture. We are ARA, reliable solutions for facilities and infrastructure.